The clock ticked past midnight. The hands moved with a deliberate slowness, as if savoring each second that passed. Midnight, the witching hour, a time when the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. It was a moment pregnant with possibilities, both wondrous and terrifying. Each second resonated like a hammer blow in the silence of the apartment. The ticking was relentless, a constant reminder of time slipping away. The apartment was a sanctuary of stillness where every sound was amplified. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of fabric. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and cheap whiskey. It was a scent that clung to the walls, to the furniture, to the very soul of the place. The shadows cast by the Venetian blinds danced on the walls, creating a tapestry of light and dark. Outside, the city that never sleeps was taking a nap. The streets were eerily quiet, devoid of the usual hustle and bustle. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The occasional distant siren was the only reminder of the world beyond. But here, in this room, something was stirring. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A shift in the air, a whisper of sound. It was as if the room itself was alive, aware of the presence within it. The only light came from the street lamp outside, painting stripes of yellow across the worn floorboards. The light was weak, barely enough to pierce the darkness, but it was there, a beacon in the night. The shadows it cast were long and deep, adding to the sense of mystery. The man sat alone in the flickering lamplight, his face obscured by shadows. He was a solitary figure, lost in his own thoughts. The light flickered, casting his features in sharp relief one moment, then plunging them back into darkness the next. He seemed to be waiting, but for what? It was unclear. He was a creature of the night, more comfortable in the darkness than in the light. The night was his domain, a world where he could move unseen, where he could be himself. The darkness was a cloak, a shield, a friend. It was in the night that he felt truly alive, truly himself. His name was Jack, a private investigator with a past he couldn't outrun and a future he didn't dare to dream about. He was a man of few words, haunted by the ghosts of cases past. Tonight he was haunted by something else. He took a drag of his cigarette, the glowing ember illuminating his face for a fleeting moment. His eyes, a steely blue, darted towards the door. He'd been feeling it all night, a presence just beyond his perception. It started subtly, a whisper against the silence, a tap, 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 on the other side of the door. Jack's head snapped up, his senses on high alert. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. He didn't move. He knew better than to open his door to strangers, especially at this hour. He listened intently, his hand hovering near the revolver tucked into his waistband. The air grew colder, charged with an unnatural stillness. The knocking grew louder, more demanding. It was a rhythmic pounding now, echoing through the silence of the apartment. Jack could feel the vibrations in his bones. He heard a voice then, a low murmur just beyond the threshold of his hearing. It was like whispers on the wind, laced with an unnatural chill that sent shivers down his spine. Whatever was outside his door, it wasn't human. The city outside continued its nocturnal symphony. The distant wail of sirens, the rumble of the subway, the honking of taxis, all faded into background noise against the relentless pounding on his door. But tonight, the city felt different. It felt like it was holding its breath, watching Jack's building, waiting to see what would emerge from behind that door. Section 6, the fear within. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of Jack's composure. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but there was something about this. This intrusion that cut through his defenses, he knew he couldn't ignore it. Whatever was out there was relentless. It wanted in, and it wouldn't stop until it got what it came for. Section 7. The door. The knocking reached a fever pitch, a thunderous boom that rattled the very foundations of the building. Each strike was like a hammer against an anvil, echoing through the empty hallways and sending shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. The sound was relentless, a constant reminder of the impending danger that lay just beyond the door. It was as if the very essence of fear had taken physical form, pounding against the barrier that separated safety from chaos. The door shuddered in its frame, the flimsy lock no match for the force being exerted against it. Splinters flew as the wood began to give way, the once sturdy barrier now reduced to a fragile obstacle. The lock, a mere piece of metal, twisted and bent under the pressure, its resistance futile. The door was a symbol of the last stand, a final attempt to keep the unknown at bay, but it was clear that it wouldn't hold for much longer. Jack drew his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more terrifying than the last. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was a threat that he couldn't see, couldn't predict. The weight of the gun in his hand was both a comfort and a burden, a reminder of the responsibility he bore. He knew that he had to be ready for whatever came through that door, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. His heart hammered against his ribs, a drumbeat of fear against the silence of the room. Each beat was a countdown, a reminder that time was running out. The adrenaline coursing through his veins made his senses sharper, every sound amplified, every shadow a potential threat. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back, the cold sweat of fear. His breath came in short, shallow gasps, each one a struggle to maintain control. He knew that whatever was on the other side of that door was about to change his life forever. The unknown loomed large, a dark shadow that threatened to engulf him. He could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on him, the sense that this moment was a turning point. The door was more than just a physical barrier. It was a gateway to a new reality, one that he wasn't sure he was ready to face. But there was no turning back now. The door would open, and he would have to confront whatever lay beyond. Section 8. Confrontation. With a deafening crack, the door burst open. The force of it sent splinters of wood flying through the air, the shadows retreating momentarily as a blinding light flooded the room. Jack stood his ground, his gun leveled at the intruder, but there was nothing there, only the echo of the shattered door and the lingering scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and cold. Section 9. The abyss gazes back. This was a place where the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred, where the shadows seemed to have a life of their own. Jack had always been drawn to the mysterious, the unexplained, but he never imagined it would lead him here. The knocking started again. This time it wasn't coming from the door. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he strained to listen. The sound was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the very walls were alive, pulsating with a malevolent energy. It was coming from inside the apartment, from the walls, from the ceiling, from the very air itself, surrounding him, trapping him. Jack felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He had read about haunted places, seen movies about them, but experiencing it firsthand was something entirely different. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, and the shadows seemed to close in on him. The light faded, plunging the room back into darkness. Jack fumbled for his flashlight, his hands trembling. The darkness was oppressive, almost tangible, and it seemed to whisper to him, filling his mind with dread. He managed to switch on the flashlight, but its beam was weak, barely cutting through the gloom. Jack was left alone with the sound of his own ragged breathing and the chilling realization that he had invited something terrible into his life. He remembered the old book he had found, the one that spoke of ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge. He had thought it was just a curiosity, a relic of a bygone era, but now he knew better. He had awakened something that had been waiting in the darkness for centuries, something that couldn't be stopped, something that couldn't be outrun. Jack's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out, but deep down he knew there was no escape. The entity he had summoned was relentless, and it would not rest until it had claimed him. He could feel its presence, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to seep into his very soul. And as the darkness closed in, Jack realized that he was truly alone, with no one to save him from the abyss that gazed back.